The emergency alarm blared through the pristine halls of New Hope Medical Center, its urgent tone cutting through the usual quiet of the night shift. Dr. Richard Wells looked up from his tablet, his lined face illuminated by the soft blue glow of advanced medical displays that covered the walls of his office. The year was 2157, and he was one of the most respected surgeons in the facility. The message flashing across his screen was marked urgent, critical patient plasma burn victim age 12 immediate surgery required. Dr. Wells tapped the screen for more details, his fingers moving with practiced precision. The patient's file appeared, and his eyes narrowed as he read through the information. The girl's name was Amanda Thompson, brought in after an accident at one of the city's power plants where her mother worked as an engineer. The doctor's expression changed subtly as he scrolled down to the patient's photo. His jaw tightened, and something cold crept into his pale blue eyes. The girl in the picture had dark skin and bright eyes, her school photo showing a wide smile that was now hidden behind severe plasma burns. Through the glass walls of his office, he could see the medical staff rushing past, preparing the emergency theater for surgery. Nurse Mary Parker, a veteran of 20 years at New Hope, stopped at his door, her face flushed with urgency. "Dr. Wells, we need you in Theater 3 right now," she said, her voice steady but intense. "The girl's burns are severe, and we're looking at complete organ failure if we don't act fast. The plasma exposure is unlike anything we've seen before." Dr. Wells slowly put down his tablet. "I'm reviewing some important cases for tomorrow," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Dr. Thompson should be on call for emergencies tonight." Nurse Parker's eyes widened slightly. "Dr. Thompson is handling another critical case in Theater 1. You're the only plasma burn specialist available, and you know the protocol for pediatric cases." She paused, then added, "We have less than 30 minutes before the damage becomes irreversible." The doctor turned back to his screens, his movements deliberately slow. "I'm sure Dr. Thompson can handle both cases. Or call Dr. Roberts from the downtown facility. I have a full schedule tomorrow that I need to prepare for." The nurse stood frozen for a moment, her experienced eyes taking in the situation. She had seen this before: the careful neutrality, the convenient excuses, the subtle deflection. In 20 years of service, she had learned to read between the lines of such moments. "Dr. Wells," she said, her voice dropping lower, "this girl needs immediate treatment. Her vital signs are dropping, and you're the best we have for plasma burns. Your schedule tomorrow can't be more important than saving a child's life tonight." The doctor's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Nurse Parker, I've made my position clear. I'm busy with important cases that require my attention. Please find another solution." He turned back to his tablet, a clear dismissal. Outside the office, the emergency team continued their preparations, unaware of the conversation taking place. The advanced medical equipment hummed with energy, ready to save a life if only given the chance. Through the large windows of the hospital, the city's gleaming towers stretched into the night sky, a testament to humanity's progress in so many ways. But inside that office, an ancient darkness lurked behind modern technology. Dr. Wells continued to stare at his screen, ignoring the urgent messages now flooding his system. Each beep represented seconds ticking away from Amanda Thompson's chance of survival. Nurse Parker stood at the door for one more moment, her hands clenched at her sides. In all her years of service, she had never felt so helpless. She knew what was happening, had seen it before, but proving it was another matter entirely. With a last look at the doctor, she turned and rushed back to the emergency room. They would need to find another solution, and fast. What no one in the hospital knew was that this night would change everything, not just for Dr. Wells or Amanda Thompson, but for the entire human race. Because sometimes, the universe has its own way of dealing with injustice, and help can come from the most unexpected places. Nurse Parker's footsteps echoed through the hallway as she ran toward the emergency wing. Her mind raced faster than her feet, thinking of alternatives. 20 minutes remained before Amanda's condition would become irreversible. The clock on the wall seemed to mock her with each passing second. In the trauma room, Amanda lay unconscious on the bed, surrounded by floating medical displays showing her declining vital signs. The plasma burns had left angry red marks across her right side, the advanced healing gel barely containing the damage. Her small chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, helped by the breathing machine. "Any response from Dr. Wells?" asked Dr. Lisa Brown, a young emergency physician who had been stabilizing Amanda. Her dark circled eyes showed the strain of a long night shift. Nurse Parker shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's busy with important cases," she said, making air quotes with her fingers. "Just like he was busy 3 months ago when the Jacksons brought in their son, and last year with Mrs. Robinson's emergency." Dr. Brown's eyes widened with understanding. She had been new then, but she remembered those cases. All patients with dark skin, all somehow ended up being treated by other doctors despite Dr. Wells being the best qualified. "We can't let this happen again," Dr. Brown said firmly. She tapped her medical tablet, bringing up the hospital's emergency protocols. "I'm not as experienced with plasma burns, but I'm going to take this case. We can't wait any longer." Just then, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Wells stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway. "I've reconsidered," he said smoothly. "I can spare 30 minutes to consult on the case." Nurse Parker stepped forward, anger finally breaking through her professional composure. "Consult? This girl needs immediate surgery, not a consultation. And suddenly you have time? What changed in the last 10 minutes, doctor?" Dr. Wells's face remained impassive. "I'm offering my assistance, Nurse Parker. Would you rather I leave?" "What I'd rather," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "is for you to explain why every time certain patients need your help, you're suddenly too busy. Why your important cases always seem to come up when the patient's skin is a different color than yours." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of Amanda's monitors. Dr. Wells's face flushed red, but before he could respond, a soft chime indicated a new presence in the room. Through the door came Mr. Johnson, the hospital's legal advisor. His usually cheerful face was serious. "Dr. Wells, we need to talk." "Now." "I'm in the middle of a consultation," Dr. Wells said stiffly. "No, you're not," Dr. Brown cut in. "I'm taking this case. Nurse Parker, let's begin prep for surgery." She turned to the medical displays, her fingers flying over the controls as she accessed the plasma burn protocols. Mr. Johnson placed a hand on Dr. Wells's arm. "Doctor, there are some observers in my office who have questions about your recent case history. This isn't a request." As Dr. Wells was led away, his face a mask of controlled anger, Nurse Parker felt a strange sensation. The air in the room seemed different somehow, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. She glanced at the observation window and for a moment thought she saw something a shimmer in the air, like heat waves on a summer day. But there was no time to wonder about strange feelings or mysterious observers. Amanda's life hung in the balance, and Dr. Brown was already calling for surgical preparation. "Get me the advanced tissue regenerator," Dr. Brown commanded, her voice strong and sure despite her relative inexperience with plasma burns. "We're going to save this girl, with or without Dr. Wells." As the trauma team sprang into action, none of them realized that this night would mark not just a turning point in their careers, but in human history. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices, and somewhere above the hospital, unseen eyes were watching every move they made. Mr. Johnson led Dr. Wells down the gleaming corridor toward his office, their footsteps echoing against the polished floor. The legal advisor's usual friendly demeanor had vanished, replaced by an urgency that made Dr. Wells increasingly uncomfortable. "What's so important it couldn't wait until after my consultation?" Dr. Wells demanded, still maintaining his air of authority despite the growing unease in his stomach. Mr. Johnson stopped abruptly and turned to face the doctor. Did you bother to read Amanda Thompson's full file before refusing to treat her? I told you, I was busy with her parents, Mr. Johnson cut in, are Robert and Diana Thompson. Does that name mean anything to you? Dr. Wells frowned, then his face went pale as recognition hit. Robert Thompson was Earth's lead negotiator for the Interstellar Medical Exchange Program. The program that could revolutionize human medicine with alien technology. Impossible, Dr. Wells whispered. The Thompsons are black? Yes, doctor. And right now, they're in my office with 3 representatives from the Galactic Medical Council who were here to finalize the exchange agreement. The corridor suddenly felt too bright, too cold. Dr. Wells tugged at his collar, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Meanwhile, in the surgical prep room, Dr. Brown and her team worked frantically to save Amanda. The advanced tissue regenerator hummed as it fought to repair the plasma damage. Nurse Parker monitored the girl's vital signs, her experienced eyes catching every slight change. The observation room above the operating theater was unusually crowded. Diana Thompson stood with her hands pressed against the glass, watching her daughter fight for life. Her husband Robert sat rigidly in a chair, his diplomat's composure barely hiding his rage and fear. But it was the other observers who made the room truly extraordinary. 3 tall figures stood slightly apart, their forms seeming to shift and change in the light. They appeared almost human, but not quite. Their skin had a subtle iridescent quality, and their eyes held depths of wisdom that no human eyes could match. The tallest of the aliens, who had introduced themselves as the healers, turned to Robert Thompson. Its voice was soft but carried a weight of authority that filled the room. We have seen enough, it said. This incident confirms our worst fears about Earth's medical system. Diana spun around, tears streaking her face. Please, she begged, don't punish everyone for one doctor's prejudice. There are good people down there, fighting to save our daughter. The second healer stepped forward, its form rippling with what might have been emotion. Yes, we see them. The young doctor who stepped forward despite her fears. The nurse who stood up against injustice. They show us what humanity could be. In the operating room below, Dr. Brown fought against time itself. The plasma burns were unlike anything she'd seen in her training, but she refused to give up. Nurse Parker worked alongside her, anticipating her needs before she could voice them. Suddenly, one of the medical displays began to pulse with an odd light. The surgical team paused, startled, as streams of data in an unknown language scrolled across the screen. What's happening? Dr. Brown asked, her hands steady despite her confusion. Nurse Parker stared at the strange symbols. I don't know, but look at Amanda's readings. The girl's vital signs, which had been dangerously low, were starting to stabilize. The plasma burns seemed to be responding to an energy they couldn't see, healing faster than any human medicine could achieve. In the observation room, the 3 healers stood with their hands raised, a soft glow emanating from their bodies. Robert and Diana Thompson watched in awe as their daughter's wounds began to heal before their eyes. We will not let an innocent child suffer for the failures of others, the 3rd healer announced. But after this, Earth must face its judgment. The time has come for humanity to confront its deepest flaws. Down in his office, Dr. Wells was about to learn just how far the consequences of his actions would reach, not just for himself, but for all of human medicine. The hospital conference room had never felt so small. Dr. Wells sat at the long table, his usual confidence shattered as he faced the 3 healers. Their forms shifted like liquid mercury under the bright lights, making them impossible to look at directly for too long. Mr. Johnson stood by the door, his tablet recording every word of this historic meeting. Robert and Diana Thompson sat opposite Dr. Wells, their daughter now resting safely in the recovery room below, her wounds miraculously healed by alien technology. The lead healer, who had introduced itself as the Guardian, stepped forward. Its voice resonated with centuries of wisdom. For 1,000 years, We have watched developing civilizations as they approached the crossroads of medical advancement. Images appeared in the air above the table, countless worlds, countless species, all facing the same challenges Earth now confronted. Your world stands at the threshold of a great leap forward, the second healer continued. Your technology has advanced enough to join the galactic medical network. But technology alone is not enough. Dr. Wells shifted uncomfortably in his chair as the third healer turned its penetrating gaze toward him. We have seen how you treat your own kind, Doctor. How you let prejudice override your oath to heal. I have always provided the highest standard of care to my patients, Dr. Wells stuttered, but his words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Diana Thompson stood up, her voice shaking with controlled anger. What about tonight? What standard of care were you providing when you refused to treat my daughter? The Guardian raised its hand, and a new image appeared above the table. It showed Dr. Wells's complete patient history, every case he had accepted, every one he had rejected, patterns emerging in stark, undeniable detail. This is why we watch, the Guardian explained. This is why we test. Medical technology in the hands of those who discriminate becomes a weapon. We have seen worlds tear themselves apart when advanced healing becomes available only to some. Robert Thompson leaned forward. What does this mean for Earth? For the exchange program? The second healer's form rippled with what might have been compassion. Your world has shown both darkness and light tonight. We saw prejudice in Dr. Wells, yes. But we also saw courage in Dr. Brown, compassion in Nurse Parker, and the potential for change. Change? Dr. Wells whispered, his face ashen. Yes, change, the third healer stated firmly. You will be the first, Dr. Wells. You who have failed your oath so completely will experience what true healing means. The Guardian moved closer to Dr. Wells, its form now glowing with an inner light. We offer Earth a chance to join the Galactic Medical Network, but first, you must understand. You must feel. You must learn. Small spheres of light emerged from the healers' bodies, floating in the air like soap bubbles. They drifted toward Dr. Wells, who tried to push back from the table, but found himself frozen in place. These are memories, the Guardian explained. The experiences of every patient you turned away. Every life you deemed less worthy of your skills. You will live them all, feel their pain, their fear, their desperation. Diana Thompson watched with wide eyes as the spheres of light began to circle Dr. Wells's head. Will it hurt him? Not physically, the second healer answered. But understanding often brings its own kind of pain. He will experience every moment of suffering he caused through his prejudice. Only then can true healing begin. The spheres of light touched Dr. Wells's temples, and his eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a silent gasp as the first memory hit him. This is not punishment, the Guardian stated, its voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. This is education. This is the price of advancement. Earth must learn that healing knows no color, no race, no differences. Only then can you be trusted with the power we offer. As Dr. Wells began to tremble in his chair, tears streaming down his face, the healers turned to the Thompsons. Now, we show you what Earth's medical future could be if humanity is ready to embrace true equality in healing. Above the table, a new image formed, a vision of Earth's potential future, where advanced alien medical technology merged with human compassion to create something extraordinary. The hospital auditorium had been transformed overnight. Where rows of seats once stood for medical lectures, now curved benches rose in a semicircle, filled with hospital staff, administrators, and selected witnesses. The room glowed with a soft, otherworldly light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Dr. Wells sat alone in the center, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled after hours of experiencing the memories forced upon him by the healers. His eyes were red, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the arms of his chair. The three healers hovered above their own platform, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal states. The guardian's voice filled the room without seeming to raise it. This tribunal will now examine the full extent of discriminatory practices in Earth's medical system, beginning with the actions of Dr. Richard Wells. Nurse Parker was the first to testify. She stood straight and proud, her voice clear as she recounted years of observed patterns. It wasn't just tonight, she stated firmly. I've watched for 20 years as certain patients were always too complicated for Dr. Wells's schedule. Always had to be passed to other doctors. Always happened to be people of color. The second healer waved its hand, and holographic records appeared in the air, hundreds of cases, thousands of decisions, all color-coded to show the patterns of bias. Dr. Brown stepped forward next. When I first started here, I thought it was just coincidence. Then I noticed how emergency cases were distributed. How certain patients always ended up with longer wait times, fewer options, less advanced treatments. The third healer turned its penetrating gaze to the hospital administrators. You knew of these patterns. Why was no action taken? The hospital director, Mr. Anderson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We had no concrete proof. Dr. Wells's record of success with his accepted patients was exemplary. His technical skills without compassion are meaningless, the guardian interrupted. A healer who chooses who deserves care based on appearance is no healer at all. Dr. Wells finally looked up, his face wet with tears. The memories he had been forced to experience had shaken him to his core. I didn't. I never thought of it that way. I told myself I was just being selective, choosing cases where I could do the most good. Show us, commanded the guardian. Show us what you have learned. Dr. Wells stood on shaky legs. The memories were still fresh, the fear of every rejected patient, the pain of their untreated conditions, the despair of their families. He had lived through each one as if he were them. I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. So terribly wrong. I felt their pain, their fear. I felt what it was like to be turned away because of something as meaningless as skin color. I felt children suffering because I was too prejudiced to help them. The healer's forms pulsed with energy. And what of humanity's future? The guardian asked. Should we trust your species with advanced medical knowledge? Should we risk our technology being used to further discrimination? Amanda Thompson, now recovered thanks to the healer's intervention, stood up from where she sat with her parents. Her voice rang out clear and strong. You should trust us because we can learn. Because for every Dr. Wells who turned me away, there was a Dr. Brown who stepped up to help. For every person who looks away, there's someone like Nurse Parker who speaks up. The healers conferred silently, their forms swirling together like mixing colors. Finally, the guardian spoke again. This tribunal finds Dr. Richard Wells guilty of violating the most sacred principle of healing, that all life has equal value. But we also find hope in humanity's capacity for change. The second healer raised its hand, and new images appeared, visions of future hospitals, of human and alien healers working side by side, of advanced treatments available to all regardless of their appearance or origin. Your punishment, Dr. Wells, the guardian announced, will be to help build this future. To use your skills to heal all who need help, and to teach others the lessons you have learned at such cost. The fate of Earth's medical future had been decided, but for Dr. Wells, this was not an ending, it was a beginning. The empty recovery room felt both familiar and strange to Dr. Wells as he lay on the medical bed. The healers had chosen this place for his final transformation, the same room where Amanda Thompson had recovered from her plasma burns. The irony wasn't lost on him. Are you ready to begin? The guardian asked, its form shimmering beside the bed. The other two healers positioned themselves at the head and foot of the bed, creating a triangle of soft, pulsing light. Dr. Wells nodded weakly. The memories he had already experienced during the trial had shaken him deeply, but he knew there was more to come. Will I survive this? You will survive, the second healer assured him. But the person you were may not. Are you prepared for that? Before he could answer, the light from the healers intensified. The room seemed to dissolve around him, and Dr. Wells found himself floating in a sea of consciousness that wasn't his own. He was a young boy with dark skin, crying in pain, waiting hours in an emergency room while doctors treated other patients who had arrived after him. He felt the burning shame, the confusion, the growing understanding that some people saw him as less worthy of care. The scene shifted. Now he was a pregnant woman, clutching her belly in fear as a doctor dismissed her concerns without even looking at her properly. He felt her baby's life slipping away because no one would listen, no one would help in time. Again and again, the experiences crashed over him like waves. He lived 1,000 lives, felt 1,000 pains, experienced 1,000 moments of rejection and discrimination. Some were from his own past patients he had turned away, lives he had deemed less important than others. Others were from throughout history, showing him the long, dark pattern of medical prejudice across time. Please, he gasped between visions, I understand now. Make it stop. Understanding is not enough, the guardian's voice echoed in his mind. You must feel it in your soul. You must never forget. The visions continued. He was now in the future, seeing the consequences of his actions rippling through time. He watched talented young doctors give up their dreams because people like him had crushed their spirit. He saw families lose trust in the medical system, refusing to seek help until it was too late. But then the visions began to change. He saw Dr. Brown, tired but determined, saving Amanda's life. He felt Nurse Parker's unwavering commitment to treating all patients equally. He experienced the hope that filled patients when they found doctors who truly cared, who saw them as people first. Tears streamed down his face as the full weight of both the harm and the healing washed through him. Every cell in his body seemed to vibrate with new understanding. Look, the third healer commanded. Look at what could be. The final vision opened before him, a future where hospitals were places of true healing for everyone. Where advanced alien medical technology merged with human compassion. Where doctors looked at patients and saw only people in need of help. Not colors or categories. When the light finally faded, Dr. Wells found himself back in the recovery room. But everything looked different through his tears. The world itself seemed changed, or perhaps it was he who had changed. He sat up slowly, his body shaking with emotion. The three healers watched him carefully. What do you feel now? The guardian asked quietly. Dr. Wells looked at his hands, the hands that had healed so many but turned away so many others. I feel everything, he whispered. Their pain, their fear, their hope. I can't ever unfeel it. I don't want to unfeel it. Then the transformation is complete, the second healer declared. But remember, this is not the end. It is a beginning. Dr. Wells stood up, steadier now. Through the window, he could see the hospital coming to life with the morning shift. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. I want to help, he said firmly. I want to make it right. Not just for myself, but for everyone. The healers nodded in unison. Then let us begin, the guardian said, the real work of healing. 1 week after the trial, the main lobby of New Hope Medical Center buzzed with activity. News crews set up their cameras, and hospital staff gathered in growing numbers. At the center of it all stood Dr. Wells, looking both humbled and determined in his freshly pressed white coat. Amanda Thompson sat in the front row with her parents, her skin now completely healed thanks to the healer's intervention. Next to them, Dr. Brown and Nurse Parker watched with cautious optimism as Dr. Wells stepped up to the podium. The three healers hovered nearby, their forms casting gentle ripples of light across the walls. They had spent the past week helping the hospital implement new protocols, but today was about human change, not alien technology. Dr. Wells cleared his throat and looked out at the assembled crowd. The old arrogance was gone from his face, replaced by something softer, more human. A week ago, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the lobby, I failed as a doctor and as a human being. I let prejudice override my oath to heal. I turned away a child who needed help, just as I had turned away many others before her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the hospital staff nodded, having witnessed his past behavior firsthand. But thanks to the intervention of beings far wiser than us, I was given more than punishment. I was given understanding. His voice cracked slightly. I felt what my victims felt. I experienced their pain, their fear, their despair when help was denied. Amanda's father, Robert Thompson, sat straighter in his chair. As Earth's lead negotiator for the Interstellar Medical Exchange Program, he knew how much rode on what happened next. Today, Dr. Wells continued, we're announcing changes that will ensure no patient ever faces discrimination in this hospital again. Every case will be tracked transparently. Every decision will be reviewed. And most importantly, every staff member will undergo empathy training using modified versions of the technology the healers have shared with us. The Guardian floated forward, its form shimmering. We have observed your progress, Dr. Wells. Tell them what you have learned about true healing. Dr. Wells turned to face Amanda and her family. I learned that healing isn't just about fixing bodies. It's about seeing people really seeing them. Every patient who comes through these doors is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's loved one. They all deserve the same care, the same respect, the same chance at life. Nurse Parker stood up, tears in her eyes. And how will we know these aren't just words? How can we trust that real change will happen? Because I'm stepping down as head of surgery, Dr. Wells announced, causing gasps throughout the lobby. Dr. Brown will take my position. I'll be working under her supervision, focusing on training new doctors and ensuring our new anti-discrimination protocols are followed. The second healer moved to hover near Amanda. The child you refused to treat will live, Dr. Wells. What would you say to her now? Dr. Wells stepped away from the podium and walked toward Amanda. He knelt before her chair, looking her in the eyes with genuine remorse. I'm sorry, he said simply. I'm sorry I let prejudice blind me. I'm sorry I forgot that my job is to heal everyone, not just those who look like me. Can you forgive me? Amanda looked at him thoughtfully, then at the healers, then back at him. Only if you promise to help other doctors learn what you learned. So no other kid has to go through what I did. I promise, he said solemnly. Every day, for the rest of my career. The Guardian's form brightened. Then let this be the beginning. Earth's path to joining the Galactic Medical Network starts here, with this promise, in this hospital. As cameras flashed and reporters rushed to capture the moment, Dr. Wells stood up, squaring his shoulders. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in his life, he understood exactly what it meant to be a true healer. Amanda smiled and extended her hand to him. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, feeling the warmth of forgiveness and the weight of responsibility in that simple gesture. 1 year later, New Hope Medical Center looked very different. Streams of soft, alien light pulsed through transparent tubes along the walls, carrying healing energy throughout the building. Doctors in white coats worked alongside shimmering healer forms, their movements synchronized in a dance of human and alien medicine. In what used to be Dr. Wells's office, 13-year-old Amanda Thompson sat fascinated, watching a holographic display of alien anatomy. She visited the hospital every week now, not as a patient, but as part of a special youth program for aspiring medical students. Understanding different species helps us understand ourselves better, Dr. Wells explained as he adjusted the hologram. He looked older but somehow lighter, as if the weight of his past prejudices had been replaced by the joy of true healing. Every living being deserves care, regardless of how they look. Amanda nodded, her dark eyes bright with interest. Is it true that the healers are starting programs at other hospitals now? Yes, Dr. Wells smiled. Thanks to your parents' diplomatic work, the Galactic Medical Network has approved 20 new training centers across Earth. Your father's experience with what happened here helped convince them to give humanity a chance. The door slid open, and Dr. Brown walked in, now wearing the silver stripes of Chief of Surgery. Ready for the demonstration? She asked. We have quite an audience today. They walked together to the hospital's main auditorium, now transformed into a state-of-the-art teaching center. The rows of seats were filled with medical students from around the world, their faces showing every possible human ethnicity. Above them, several healers floated, their forms casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Nurse Parker, now the hospital's head of training, stood at the podium. Today marks 1 year since our hospital began its transformation, she announced. Dr. Wells will demonstrate how we've integrated alien healing techniques with human medical practices. Dr. Wells stepped onto the stage, accompanied by a healer. A holographic patient appeared between them, a complex case involving multiple injuries. In the past, Dr. Wells began, I might have seen this patient's appearance first, and their need for help second. Now, watch how we see only the life that needs saving. Together, human and healer worked on the hologram, their movements perfectly coordinated. The alien's energy merged with Earth's medical technology, showing the students a new way of healing that went beyond any single species' methods. In the front row, Amanda's parents watched with pride. Robert Thompson had successfully negotiated Earth's full membership in the Galactic Medical Network, and Diana Thompson now headed the hospital's new Xenomedicine Research Department. The most important lesson, Dr. Wells continued, addressing the students, isn't about the technology. It's about seeing everyone, human or alien, any color, any form, as equally deserving of care. I learned this lesson the hard way, but you can learn it the right way. After the demonstration, Amanda found Dr. Wells in the hallway. Do you ever regret what happened that night? She asked quietly. Dr. Wells knelt down to meet her eyes, just as he had done during his public apology a year ago. I regret my actions that night every day, he said honestly. But I'm thankful for where it led us. Your bravery, your forgiveness, helped change not just me, but the future of medicine on Earth. The Guardian, who had stayed on Earth to oversee the transition, appeared beside them. The true measure of advancement, it said, is not in technology, but in how we treat those different from ourselves. Earth has taken its first steps toward joining the greater galactic community. Through the large windows of the hospital, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Below, humans of all backgrounds entered and left the hospital, each receiving the same high level of care. Above, barely visible through the clouds, alien ships carried medical knowledge between the stars. Dr. Wells watched it all, remembering the long journey from that terrible night to this moment. Every ending, he said softly, is just a new beginning. Amanda smiled, touching the small medical scanner at her belt, a gift from the healers. And every mistake can lead to something better, if we learn from it. In the distance, another hospital began its own transformation, its windows lighting up with the same alien glow that now filled new hope. The change that had started here was spreading, one hospital, one heart, one healer at a time.